The crosswalk signal flashed red. Amanda Reynolds adjusted her grip on the stroller handle, her knuckles white against the navy blue fabric. Downtown Seattle's morning rush pressed around her like a living wall of coffee breath and hurried footsteps. The weight in the stroller felt heavier than it should have, and the yellow blanket she'd positioned so carefully over the contents shifted slightly in the October wind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 47 floors above, Marcus Webb pressed his eye to the scope of his Barrett M82 rifle. The federal building's rooftop position gave him perfect sight lines down Pine Street, where 3 blocks of morning commuters moved like ants through glass and concrete canyons. His earpiece crackled with the steady chatter of a 12-man tactical team, positioned across 6 buildings, all eyes searching for one specific target. Overwatch 7, this is Command. Target is female, approximately 5'6", brown hair. Last seen wearing dark jeans and a gray hoodie. She's pushing a navy blue stroller. Contents unknown, but considered extremely dangerous. Webb adjusted his scope, scanning faces in the crowd below. The target had disappeared into the morning pedestrian traffic after leaving the Westlake Center parking garage. Somewhere in that sea of moving bodies was a woman carrying something that had prompted the FBI to deploy their best counter-terrorism unit with less than 30 minutes' notice. Amanda stopped at the corner of Pine and 4th, waiting for the light to change. Her phone buzzed once, then twice, then began ringing continuously. She let it ring. The caller would be Dr. Harrison Blackwood, her former supervisor at the Centers for Disease Control, and she already knew what he wanted to say. The conversation would involve words like containment, protocol, and national security. Words that meant Amanda had 90 minutes to make a choice that would determine whether thousands of people lived or died. The stroller's wheels caught on an uneven piece of sidewalk, and Amanda steadied the handle with both hands. Under the blanket, secured in a modified cooler designed for transporting medical specimens, lay 18 vials of what the CDC's Bioweapons Division had designated as Agent Meridian. Each vial contained enough concentrated pathogen to infect every person within a 6-mile radius. In the wrong hands, those vials could turn Seattle into a mass casualty event that would make previous biological attacks look like minor food poisoning incidents. Movement on Pine Street, Webb reported into his headset. I've got eyes on a female with a stroller, proceeding east toward the federal building. Can't confirm identity from this distance. Amanda wasn't heading toward the federal building. She was walking away from it, toward the Seattle Center, where 30,000 people would gather for the International Technology Conference that morning. The conference where Dr. Blackwood would deliver his keynote address about breakthrough advances in biological defense systems. The same Dr. Blackwood who had authorized the creation of Agent Meridian, despite the objections of his entire research team. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had created a biological weapon disguised as defensive research would be speaking to an audience of the world's brightest minds about protecting humanity from biological threats, while Amanda walked through downtown Seattle carrying enough of his creation to prove that protection was an illusion. Her phone stopped ringing and immediately started again. This time the caller ID showed a number she recognized. FBI Field Office, Seattle Division. They discovered that Dr. Amanda Reynolds, senior virologist and former CDC bioweapons researcher, had accessed the high-security laboratory at 0347 hours that morning using credentials that should have been deactivated 3 weeks ago, when she'd submitted her resignation letter, the resignation letter that had been buried in bureaucratic review processes because Amanda knew too much about programs that officially didn't exist. Webb's scope swept across Amanda's position just as she stopped to adjust something in the stroller. For a brief moment, the yellow blanket lifted in the wind, revealing a glimpse of metallic equipment That definitely wasn't baby supplies. He activated his throat mic immediately. "Command, I have visual confirmation. Target is at Pine and 4th, northeast corner. She's got something in that stroller, and it's not a child. Requesting permission to engage. Negative, Overwatch 7. We need her alive. Those vials could be the only samples of their kind. If she's destroyed them, we'll never know what we're dealing with." Amanda heard the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors approaching from the south. 2 black helicopters, flying in formation at an altitude that was definitely not part of Seattle's normal air traffic patterns. The FBI had found her faster than she'd expected, which meant Dr. Blackwood had given them more information than he should have. Information about where she might go, what she might do, and why she'd taken the vials in the first place. She increased her pace slightly, not enough to attract attention from pedestrians around her, but enough to reach her destination before the tactical teams could establish a perimeter. The Seattle Center was 8 blocks away. 8 blocks through downtown morning traffic, past coffee shops and office buildings full of people who had no idea they were about to become witnesses to something that would change how the government approached biological weapons research forever. The stroller's modified cooling system hummed quietly, maintaining the precise temperature required to keep Agent Meridian stable. Too warm, and the pathogen would begin breaking down into harmless proteins. Too cold, and the viral structure would crystallize, making it impossible to deploy effectively. Amanda had calibrated the system herself, using knowledge gained from 4 years of working on defensive countermeasures that had gradually morphed into offensive capabilities. Agent Meridian wasn't supposed to exist. The research had been funded through National Institutes of Health grants for studying naturally occurring pathogens, but Dr. Blackwood had redirected resources toward creating enhanced versions that could overcome existing vaccines and treatments. When Amanda had discovered the true scope of the program, she'd tried to report it through official channels. The officials she'd contacted had thanked her for her dedication to safety protocols and assured her that appropriate oversight was in place. 2 days later, her security clearance had been suspended pending a routine review. 1 week after that, her laboratory access had been restricted. 3 weeks later, she'd been asked to submit her resignation for the good of the program, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd kept her active in the system just long enough for her to access the laboratory one final time. Web-tracked Amanda's movement through his scope as she navigated around a cluster of tourists, taking photographs near the Pike Place Market entrance. His radio crackled with updates from ground units converging on her position. FBI tactical teams were approaching from 3 directions, moving through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of professionals trained to blend into civilian environments. Overwatch 7, target is proceeding north on Pike Street. She's maintaining a steady pace, no indication she's aware of surveillance. But Amanda was very aware of the surveillance. She'd spent enough time in government facilities to recognize the subtle signs of coordinated law enforcement operations. The way certain people in business suits walked just slightly too purposefully through the morning crowd. The fact that several individuals were speaking into concealed microphones while maintaining visual contact with her position. The helicopter formations that were definitely not news aircraft or tourist flights. She stopped at a street vendor and purchased a cup of coffee, using the transaction to scan the surrounding area while maintaining the appearance of casual civilian behavior. 3 agents at her 2 o'clock, positioned near the entrance to a corporate plaza. 2 more at 10 o'clock, pretending to wait for a bus that had already passed its scheduled stop. And somewhere above, at least one sniper with a clear line of sight to her current position. The coffee was terrible, but Amanda drank it anyway, buying herself 30 seconds to make a final decision about what happened next. She could surrender the vials to federal authorities and hope that someone in the chain of command would investigate Dr. Blackwood's program properly. She could destroy the samples right here on the street, eliminating the immediate threat, but also destroying the evidence needed to expose what the CDC had really been developing. Or she could continue toward the Seattle Center, where 30,000 people were gathering to hear Dr. Blackwood speak about biological defense, completely unaware that the man they were applauding had created the very weapons he claimed to be protecting them from. Amanda finished the coffee and dropped the cup into a nearby trash bin. The yellow blanket over the stroller fluttered again in the morning breeze, and somewhere 47 floors above, a sniper adjusted his scope to maintain visual contact with a woman, pushing 18 vials of concentrated death through the heart of downtown Seattle. The light changed. Amanda stepped into the crosswalk, and every federal agent within 6 blocks began moving toward the same destination. 6 months earlier, Dr. Amanda Reynolds had believed she was saving lives. The CDC's Special Pathogens Laboratory occupied 3 underground levels beneath the agency's Atlanta headquarters, where some of the world's most dangerous biological agents were studied under containment protocols that made nuclear facilities look casual about security. Amanda's team worked in biosafety level 4 conditions, sealed inside positive pressure suits that made every movement deliberate and every breath a reminder of the invisible death floating just outside their protective barriers. Their official mission was developing rapid response protocols for naturally occurring disease outbreaks. Their classified mission was understanding how biological weapons might be deployed against American civilians. The Meridian Project had started with legitimate concerns. Intelligence agencies reported that hostile nations were experimenting with engineered pathogens designed to overwhelm existing medical countermeasures. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, the CDC's Director of Biodefense Research, argued that defensive preparation required understanding offensive capabilities. To develop effective treatments, they needed to study enhanced pathogens that could replicate the threats America might face. Amanda's expertise in viral genetics made her indispensable to the project. She could manipulate genetic sequences with precision that bordered on artistry, crafting viral modifications that enhanced transmission rates while maintaining the pathogen's lethality. Each modification was documented as research into defensive countermeasures, but Amanda gradually realized they were creating weapons that exceeded anything their theoretical enemies possessed. The breakthrough came when Amanda successfully combined respiratory transmission efficiency with immune system evasion techniques that rendered existing vaccines useless. Agent Meridian could spread through airborne droplets with the contagiousness of influenza while carrying the mortality rate of Ebola. Infection to death took 72 hours, during which carriers remained asymptomatic but highly contagious. In controlled laboratory conditions, a single infected mouse could spread Agent Meridian to an entire colony within 8 hours. Mathematical models suggested that releasing the pathogen in a major metropolitan area could infect over 2 million people before health authorities realized an outbreak was occurring. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Blackwood had been ecstatic about the research implications. This represents exactly the kind of threat we need to prepare for, he'd told Amanda during their final progress meeting. Understanding these capabilities allows us to develop proportional responses. But Amanda noticed that no corresponding research was being conducted on treatments or vaccines. The Meridian Project consumed 90% of their laboratory's resources, while defensive countermeasures received minimal funding. When she questioned this imbalance, Dr. Blackwood explained that offensive understanding had to precede defensive development. The questions had started innocently enough. Amanda requested access to research protocols being developed by other teams, expecting to coordinate her viral modifications with treatments being developed elsewhere. Instead, she discovered that no other teams were working on Meridian countermeasures. Her enhanced pathogens were being studied in isolation, with no corresponding effort to neutralize them. Her security clearance allowed access to project funding documentation, where Amanda learned that Meridian research was being supported through Department of Defense contracts rather than public health appropriations. The money trail led through layers of classified budgets that funded activities Congress never voted to authorize. Amanda had tried to address her concerns through proper channels. She submitted a formal inquiry to the CDC's Inspector General, outlining her concerns about research protocols that violated international biological weapons treaties. The Inspector General's office acknowledged her report and promised a thorough review. 2 weeks later, Amanda received notification that her laboratory access was being temporarily restricted pending a routine security assessment. Dr. Blackwood assured her this was standard procedure for personnel with concerns about classified projects. But Amanda recognized the pattern. Whistleblowers were systematically isolated before being discredited and removed. The security assessment stretched from days into weeks, during which Amanda was reassigned to administrative duties that kept her away from active research. Her colleagues began treating her with the careful distance reserved for someone whose career was quietly ending. Phone calls to other research facilities went unreturned. Job applications disappeared into bureaucratic review processes that produced no responses. Meanwhile, the Meridian project continued without her input, but Amanda retained enough access to witness its evolution from theoretical research into practical applications. Dr. Blackwood was refining deployment methods that would allow Agent Meridian to be distributed through existing infrastructure systems. Water supplies, air conditioning systems, even food distribution. Networks could become delivery mechanisms for a pathogen designed to kill millions. The final revelation came when Amanda discovered shipping manifests for Meridian samples being sent to facilities that had no legitimate research connections to the CDC. Private laboratories with ties to defense contractors were receiving active cultures of her engineered pathogen, along with detailed instructions for cultivation and enhancement. Agent Meridian wasn't being developed as a defensive research tool. It was being distributed as an offensive biological weapon to organizations that operated outside traditional government oversight. Amanda's resignation letter had been carefully worded to avoid triggering automatic security reviews while establishing a paper trail of her concerns. She'd outlined the treaty violations, the funding irregularities, and the lack of defensive countermeasures being developed alongside offensive capabilities. The letter disappeared into administrative review processes, designed to bury inconvenient documentation, but Amanda had prepared for bureaucratic stonewalling. During her final weeks of laboratory access, she documented everything. Video recordings of Dr. Blackwood's briefings about operational deployment scenarios, financial records showing Department of Defense funding for activities that violated international biological weapons conventions, and most importantly, detailed genetic sequences for Agent Meridian that proved the pathogen was artificially enhanced beyond anything occurring in nature. The evidence was comprehensive enough to destroy Dr. Blackwood's career and expose a biological weapons program that Congress had never authorized. But evidence meant nothing if it never reached people with the authority to act on it. Dr. Blackwood's keynote address at the International Technology Conference represented a perfect opportunity. 30,000 scientists, journalists, and government officials would gather to hear him speak about biological defense innovations that were secretly based on offensive weapons research. The audience would include investigators from multiple international organizations, people with the expertise to understand the implications of what Amanda had discovered. But exposing the program required more than documentation. It required proof that Agent Meridian existed as a functional biological weapon rather than theoretical research. Amanda needed actual samples of the pathogen she'd helped create, along with evidence of its enhancement beyond natural capabilities. The laboratory security protocol she'd helped design made unauthorized access nearly impossible. But Amanda retained emergency override codes that remained active until her resignation was officially processed. Those codes provided 18 minutes of access to the special pathogens laboratory, enough time to retrieve the samples needed to prove her allegations. The modified cooler in the stroller had been designed for transporting medical specimens, equipped with temperature controls that could maintain agent meridian stability for up to 6 hours. Amanda had calculated travel time from the laboratory to the Seattle Center with precision that accounted for traffic patterns, security checkpoints, and the time required to reach the conference venue. But she hadn't anticipated that Dr. Blackwood would discover the missing samples before her flight reached Seattle. Airport security footage must have identified her, allowing federal agencies to track her movements and deploy tactical teams with enough advance warning to establish surveillance positions throughout downtown Seattle. Now Amanda walked through morning crowds carrying 18 vials of engineered death, pursued by federal agents who wanted to recover the samples without acknowledging they existed. The civilians around her continued their normal routines, unaware that they were witnessing the final act of a biological weapons program that had operated in secret for over 2 years. The Seattle Center loomed ahead, its distinctive Space Needle, rising above exhibition halls where Dr. Blackwood would soon address an international audience about biological defense research that was actually offensive weapons development. Amanda adjusted her grip on the stroller handle and continued walking toward the moment when she would choose between personal safety and public exposure of activities that violated every international treaty governing biological warfare. Behind her, FBI tactical teams maintained their surveillance distance, waiting for instructions about how to recover biological weapons from a former government scientist who had decided that some secrets were too dangerous to keep. The Seattle Center's main entrance buzzed with morning activity as conference attendees streamed through security checkpoints designed to screen for conventional threats. Metal detectors, bag searches, and credential verification created bottlenecks that slowed pedestrian traffic to a manageable flow. Amanda approached the northeast gate, where families with strollers received expedited screening through a separate lane marked Family Entrance. Special Agent Catherine Torres watched Amanda's approach through high-powered binoculars from her position inside a catering truck parked across Denny Way. The FBI's Tactical Command Center had been established in the vehicle's retrofitted interior, where multiple screens displayed surveillance feeds from 17 different camera angles covering the Seattle Center's perimeter. Falcon 1 to all units, Torres spoke into her headset microphone. Target is approaching the northeast entrance. She's heading for the family screening lane. All units maintain observation distance, but be prepared for immediate containment. Amanda joined the queue behind a young mother pushing twin toddlers in a double-wide stroller. The security personnel manning the family entrance wore the casual efficiency of workers who'd processed thousands of similar screenings without incident. Their metal detection wands moved in practiced patterns around stroller frames, checking for weapons that pose conventional security risks. None of them were trained to identify biological weapons, concealed and modified. Medical equipment. The mother with twins passed through screening without incident, her children chattering about the exhibits they wanted to see inside the conference center. Amanda stepped forward, presenting her conference credentials to the security supervisor. Dr. Amanda Reynolds, CDC Special Research Division, she said, handing over identification that remained technically valid despite her pending resignation. I'm presenting research updates in the Biodefense Symposium. The supervisor scanned Amanda's credentials through his handheld verification device, which displayed her clearance level and conference authorization. Everything appeared legitimate because it was legitimate. Amanda's access hadn't been officially revoked, only informally restricted through administrative procedures that hadn't caught up with computer systems. Any electronic devices or research materials in the stroller? The supervisor asked, following protocols designed to prevent industrial espionage rather than biological terrorism. Medical specimen containers for demonstration purposes, Amanda replied. Temperature-controlled samples that are part of my presentation materials. The security wand passed over the stroller's exterior without triggering any alerts. The metallic components inside the modified cooler were standard medical equipment, indistinguishable from legitimate research apparatus. The biological samples themselves were contained in vials designed to be undetectable by conventional screening methods. But Amanda's credentials triggered an automated alert in the FBI's command center. The verification scan had been flagged by federal watch lists, sending Amanda's location and identification directly to Agent Torres's surveillance team. Command, we have positive identification, Torres reported. Target has just cleared Seattle Center security using active CDC credentials. She's inside the perimeter with the biological materials. The voice that responded belonged to Assistant Director Frank Morrison, speaking from FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Agent Torres, you are authorized to initiate containment procedures immediately. We cannot allow those samples to reach the conference venue. Amanda wheeled the stroller through the Seattle Center's main concourse, where early morning foot traffic moved between exhibition halls and conference rooms. The International Technology Conference occupied the entire West Wing, where registration desks processed attendees for sessions that would begin in 45 minutes. Dr. Blackwood's keynote address was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. in the main auditorium. A presentation titled Biological Defense Innovation, Protecting Civilian Populations from Emerging Threats. The irony remained bitter in Amanda's mouth as she navigated toward the press registration area, where journalists would receive credentials allowing them to record and broadcast the morning sessions. Agent Torres and her tactical team entered the Seattle Center through 3 different entrances, their movements coordinated to avoid creating obvious law enforcement presence that might panic civilian crowds. They wore civilian clothing with concealed weapons and communication equipment, blending into the conference atmosphere while maintaining tactical readiness. Unit 2, target is proceeding toward the West Wing. She's approximately 8 minutes from the main auditorium. Amanda reached the press registration desk, where a cheerful volunteer processed credentials for media representatives covering the conference. Hi there, the volunteer said, glancing at Amanda's CDC identification. Are you here for media interviews or research presentations? I'm hoping to speak with some of the journalists covering Dr. Blackwood's keynote, Amanda replied. I have some additional context about biological defense research that might interest them. The volunteer handed Amanda a press access badge and a schedule of morning sessions. The media room is just down the hall. Most of the science reporters should be there preparing for the 10:30 presentation. Amanda clipped the press badge to her jacket and continued toward the media room, where she would find journalists with the expertise to understand the implications of what she was about to reveal. The stroller's wheels moved smoothly across polished concrete floors, its cargo maintaining optimal temperature while Amanda prepared to destroy her career and possibly her freedom to expose a biological weapons program that officially didn't exist. Agent Torres received updated positioning reports from her team as they established a containment perimeter around the West Wing. Units 3 and 4 establish positions at all exits from the media room. Unit 5, I need eyes on the main auditorium entrances. If she gets into that presentation space with 30,000 people, we'll have a mass casualty scenario. But Amanda wasn't planning to release Agent Meridian into a crowded auditorium. The biological samples in her stroller were evidence, not weapons. Her intention was to present the vials to journalists who could document their existence while Amanda explained how a defensive research program had become an offensive. Biological weapons operation. The media room contained approximately 40 journalists setting up recording equipment and reviewing presentation materials for the morning sessions. Amanda recognized several science reporters from major news organizations, people with the technical background to understand viral genetics and biological weapons treaties. She positioned the stroller near the center of the room and began adjusting the yellow blanket that concealed the modified cooler. The journalists continued their preparations, unaware that someone was about to provide them with the biggest story of their careers. Agent Torres's voice crackled through FBI communication channels. All units, the target has entered the media room. Repeat, she is now in proximity to international press representatives. We need immediate containment before she makes any public statements. Amanda opened the cooler and carefully removed one of the 18 vials containing Agent Meridian. The clear glass container held approximately 50 milliliters of fluid that looked like ordinary saline solution but contained enough engineered pathogens to infect everyone in the Seattle Center. Within 6 hours, several journalists noticed Amanda's activities and approached with the curiosity that defined their profession. "Excuse me," said Rebecca Matthews, a science correspondent for the Washington Post. "Are you here for the biodefense presentation? That looks like interesting research equipment." Amanda held up the vial so the journalists could see it clearly while keeping it safely sealed. "My name is Dr. Amanda Reynolds, and I'm a former senior researcher with the CDC's Special Pathogens Laboratory. This vial contains a biological weapon called Agent Meridian that was developed under a classified program that violates international biological weapons treaties." The journalists stopped their conversations and focused on Amanda with the laser intensity of professionals recognizing a major story. Cameras began recording, and notepads appeared as reporters prepared to document what Amanda was about to reveal. Agent Meridian is an artificially enhanced pathogen designed to overcome existing vaccines and medical countermeasures, Amanda continued. It was developed under the pretense of defensive research, but the actual purpose was creating biological weapons for offensive deployment. Rebecca Matthews stepped closer, her recording device capturing every word. "Dr. Reynolds, are you alleging that the CDC has been developing biological weapons in violation of international law?" "I'm not alleging it," Amanda replied, holding up additional vials from the cooler. "I'm proving it. These samples were created in CDC laboratories using Department of Defense funding for a program that Congress never authorized." The man giving this morning's keynote presentation, Dr. Harrison Blackwood, has been directing biological weapons research while publicly claiming to work on defensive countermeasures. Agent Torres and her tactical team reached the media room entrance just as Amanda began her second round of revelations. Through the glass doors, Torres could see the stroller, the vials, and approximately 40 journalists recording everything. Amanda said, "Command, we have a problem," Torres reported. "Target has just revealed classified biological weapons to international media representatives. The story is already being recorded and transmitted." Assistant Director Morrison's response carried the weight of someone making decisions that would affect national security policy for decades. "Agent Torres, you are authorized to use any means necessary to contain this situation. We cannot allow those samples or that information to leave the building." But containment was no longer possible. Amanda had crossed the point of no return, transforming from a rogue government scientist into a public whistleblower whose revelations were already being broadcast in news organizations around the world. The confrontation that was about to unfold would determine whether the American people learned the truth about biological weapons programs operating in their name, or whether those programs would continue operating in secrecy while Amanda disappeared into the federal prison system for violating national security laws. Agent Torres drew her weapon and prepared to enter the media room, knowing that everything she did next would be recorded by international journalists and broadcast to millions of people who were about to learn that their government had been developing weapons designed to kill them. Agent Torres hesitated at the media room entrance, her service weapon drawn but pointed downward. Through the glass doors, she could see 43 journalists from 17 countries recording Amanda's revelations about biological weapons development. Every word was being transmitted live to news organizations that would broadcast the story to millions of viewers within minutes. "Agent Torres, what's your status?" Assistant Director Morrison's voice carried increasing urgency through her earpiece. "Sir, the situation has become extremely complex," Torres replied quietly. "Target is surrounded by international media. Any aggressive action will be recorded and broadcast globally. We're looking at a potential diplomatic incident if we move against her while she's making these disclosures." Inside the media room, Amanda carefully arranged the 18 vials of Agent Meridian on a nearby table, each one labeled with technical specifications that prove their artificial enhancement beyond naturally occurring pathogens. The journalists pressed closer, their cameras capturing documentation that would make denial impossible. "Dr. Reynolds," said James Mitchell from the BBC, "you're alleging that a senior CDC official has been developing biological weapons while publicly advocating for biological defense. Can you provide specific evidence of this deception?" Amanda reached into the stroller and withdrew a tablet computer containing encrypted files she'd accumulated during her final weeks at the laboratory. "I have video recordings of Dr. Blackwood's briefings about operational deployment scenarios for Agent Meridian, financial records showing Department of Defense funding for research that violates international biological weapons conventions, and genetic sequence data proving that these pathogens were artificially enhanced far beyond anything occurring in nature." She activated the tablet, displaying a video file that showed Dr. Blackwood addressing a room full of military officials. In the recording, Blackwood described Agent Meridian's potential for area denial operations and population control applications that had nothing to do with defensive medical research. "The audio quality is excellent," noted Sarah Chen from Reuters, adjusting her recording equipment to capture both Amanda's narration and the video evidence. "Dr. Blackwood is clearly discussing offensive applications for biological agents." Agent Torres received new instructions through her earpiece. That changed everything about the tactical situation. "Agent Torres, we've just received word from the Attorney General's office. Dr. Reynolds is now considered a protected federal whistleblower under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. You are ordered to provide security for her safety, not containment of her activities." Torres lowered her weapon completely, confusion evident in her voice. "Sir, please clarify. Are we protecting her or arresting her?" "Protecting her," Morrison replied. "We've just learned that Dr. Reynolds filed formal whistleblower complaints with 3 different oversight agencies 6 months ago. Those complaints were buried by officials who are now under federal investigation. She tried to expose this program through legal channels before taking direct action. The revelation changed Torres's mission from containment to protection, but it also raised disturbing questions about how high the conspiracy extended within government agencies. If Amanda's whistleblower complaints had been suppressed by federal officials, then the biological weapons program had supporters in multiple departments. Amanda continued her presentation to the journalists, displaying financial documents that traced Department of Defense funding through layers of classified budgets. The Meridian Project received over $340 million in funding over 2 years, all allocated through defense contracts that bypassed congressional oversight. This money was used to develop biological weapons while Congress believed they were funding defensive medical research. Rebecca Matthews from the Washington Post studied the financial records on Amanda's tablet. "Dr. Reynolds, These documents suggest that biological weapons research was being conducted with the knowledge and approval of senior defense officials. Are you alleging a conspiracy that extends beyond the CDC? I'm not alleging conspiracy. Amanda replied, opening another file that contained correspondence between Dr. Blackwood and Pentagon officials. I'm documenting it. These emails show coordination between CDC researchers and military planners who are designing deployment scenarios for biological agents that officially didn't exist. The emails revealed discussions about contingency operations and asymmetric response capabilities that described using Agent Meridian against civilian populations in hostile nations. Military officials had requested specific viral modifications that would overcome medical countermeasures available to enemy forces while remaining treatable by American medical facilities. James Mitchell adjusted his camera angle to capture the email correspondence clearly. These communications suggest that biological weapons were being developed for specific military operations rather than general research purposes. Agent Torres entered the media room with her weapon holstered, approaching Amanda with the careful demeanor of someone providing protection rather than enforcement. Dr. Reynolds, I'm Special Agent Catherine Torres with the FBI. I've been ordered to ensure your safety while you continue making these disclosures. The journalists immediately focused their cameras on Torres, recognizing that federal protection of a whistleblower represented official acknowledgement of her credibility. Amanda looked surprised but continued organizing her evidence for maximum impact. Agent Torres, can you confirm that Dr. Reynolds' allegations are being taken seriously by federal law enforcement? Asked Sarah Chun. Torres chose her words carefully. I can confirm that Dr. Reynolds is considered a protected federal whistleblower, and that her safety is now a priority for the FBI. I cannot comment on ongoing investigations, but I can state that her disclosures are being reviewed at the highest levels of government. Amanda activated another video file showing laboratory footage of Agent Meridian testing on animal subjects. The images were disturbing, mice succumbing to engineered pathogens, within hours, while researchers documented transmission rates and mortality statistics. The clinical detachment of the researchers contrasted sharply with the suffering they were documenting. This testing was conducted to optimize Agent Meridian's lethality rather than develop countermeasures. Amanda explained, no corresponding research was being conducted on treatments or vaccines. The entire program was focused on creating more effective biological weapons. The laboratory footage provided visual evidence that made Amanda's allegations undeniable. International journalists were witnessing documentation of biological weapons, research that violated multiple international treaties the United States had signed and ratified. Rebecca Matthews posed the question that everyone was thinking. Dr. Reynolds, where is Dr. Blackwood now? Is he aware that you've exposed his research program? Amanda checked her watch. Dr. Blackwood is scheduled to deliver his keynote address in approximately 25 minutes. He'll be speaking to 30,000 scientists and government officials about biological defense innovations that are actually based on the offensive weapons research I've just shown you. The irony was staggering. The man responsible for developing biological weapons would soon address an international audience about protecting civilian populations from the very threats he'd helped create. Amanda's timing had been calculated to maximize the impact of her revelations by contrasting them with Blackwood's public deception. Agent Torres received another update through her earpiece that added new urgency to the situation. Dr. Reynolds, I've just been informed that federal agents are moving to arrest Dr. Blackwood and secure the CDC laboratory facilities where this research was conducted. Your evidence has triggered a major federal investigation. The journalists realized they were witnessing the real-time collapse of a clandestine biological weapons program. Amanda's decision to expose the research publicly had forced government officials to choose between covering up illegal activities and enforcing laws that protected national security. "Agent Torres," said James Mitchell, "can you tell us whether other government officials were aware of this biological weapons research?" Torres consulted with her superiors through her earpiece before responding. "I can confirm that multiple federal agencies are now investigating the scope of unauthorized biological weapons research and the officials who may have been involved in covering up illegal activities." Amanda displayed her final piece of evidence, a document signed by Dr. Blackwood requesting expansion of the Meridian Project to include research on airborne deployment systems that could distribute biological agents through urban infrastructure. The request had been approved by officials whose names were redacted, but their titles indicated involvement at the highest levels of government. This document proves that biological weapons research wasn't limited to laboratory development. Amanda explained, military officials were planning operational deployment of these agents against civilian populations. The revelation represented the most damaging evidence yet disclosed, proving that biological weapons research had progressed from theoretical studies to practical applications, designed for actual use against human populations. Rebecca Matthews summarized the significance of Amanda's disclosures for her viewing audience. "What we're witnessing here is the exposure of a clandestine biological weapons program that operated within the CDC while violating international law and congressional oversight. Dr. Reynolds has provided comprehensive evidence of activities that represent the most serious breach of biological weapons treaties in American history." Agent Torres positioned herself between Amanda and the media room entrance, providing security while allowing the journalists to continue documenting evidence that would reshape public understanding of government biological research programs. The game had changed completely. Amanda was no longer a fugitive carrying stolen biological weapons. She was a protected federal whistleblower whose revelations had triggered investigations that would reach the highest levels of government and expose activities that had been hidden from the American people for over 2 years. The main auditorium of the Seattle Center buzzed with anticipation as 30,000 attendees took their seats for Dr. Harrison Blackwood's keynote presentation. The audience included Nobel Prize winners, cabinet officials, international health ministers, and journalists who had no idea they were about to witness the most dramatic exposure of government deception in recent history. Dr. Blackwood stood behind the stage curtain, reviewing his presentation notes one final time. His speech, titled "Biological Defense Innovation: Protecting Civilian Populations from Emerging Threats," contained carefully crafted language about defensive research that concealed 2 years of illegal biological weapons development. His phone buzzed with an urgent text message from his assistant. "FBI agents at CDC Atlanta facility. Lab sealed. Need immediate legal counsel." Blackwood stared at the message, his confidence evaporating as he realized that his carefully constructed program was collapsing in real time. Somewhere in the Seattle Center, Amanda Reynolds was destroying everything he'd built while he prepared to address an audience. That included the very officials who would soon be investigating his activities. In the media room, Amanda watched a live news feed on Rebecca Matthews' laptop as CNN interrupted regular programming to broadcast breaking news about biological weapons research within the CDC. The story was spreading across international media faster than any biological agent could transmit, reaching millions of viewers who were learning about Agent Meridian for the first time. "This is Wolf Blitzer reporting from Washington," the CNN anchor announced. "We're receiving confirmation that federal agents have raided CDC facilities in Atlanta following whistleblower allegations of illegal biological weapons research." Dr. Amanda Reynolds, a former CDC researcher, has provided evidence to international media that suggests senior government officials authorized the development of biological agents in violation of international treaties. Agent Torres coordinated with FBI headquarters while maintaining security around Amanda's position. "Sir, the story has gone global. We're tracking coverage in 47 countries within the past 20 minutes. There's no way to contain the information now." Assistant Director Morrison's response reflected the reality of modern information warfare. Agent Torres, containment is no longer the objective. Dr. Reynolds' disclosures have triggered emergency sessions in Congress and emergency meetings at the United Nations. We need to focus on protecting her while federal prosecutors build cases against the officials responsible for this program. The ripple effects extended far beyond media coverage. In Geneva, the International Committee of the Red Cross called for immediate investigation of American compliance with biological weapons treaties. The World Health Organization demanded access to all research data related to Agent Meridian. Allied nations began questioning intelligence sharing agreements with the United States. Amanda received a phone call from Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who had been monitoring the unfolding crisis from Washington. "Dr. Reynolds, I want you to know that Congress will be conducting immediate hearings about the biological weapons program you've exposed. Your testimony will be essential for understanding how this research was authorized and funded without congressional oversight." The conversation was broadcast live as Amanda kept her phone on speaker, allowing the assembled journalists to hear direct communication between a whistleblower and the senators who would investigate her allegations. "Senator Williams," Amanda replied, "I have additional documentation that shows this program extended beyond the CDC to include research facilities operated by private defense contractors. The scope of biological weapons development is much larger than what I've revealed today." Senator Williams' response carried the weight of someone recognizing a national security crisis. "Dr. Reynolds, I'm authorizing immediate protective custody for you and your family. We cannot allow any harm to come to someone who has exposed activities that threaten the constitutional oversight of biological weapons research." In the main auditorium, Dr. Blackwood stepped onto the stage as his world collapsed around him. The audience applauded politely, unaware that federal agents were already moving through the building to arrest the man they were hearing speak about biological defense. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwood began, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting behind the scenes, "today I want to discuss the critical importance of biological defense research in protecting civilian populations from emerging pathogenic threats." But even as he spoke, audience members were receiving alerts on their smartphones about breaking news, coverage of biological weapons research within the CDC, the contradiction between Blackwood's presentation and the real-time news reports created confusion that rippled through the auditorium. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a microbiologist from the University of Barcelona, stood up during Blackwood's presentation and called out from the audience, "Dr. Blackwood, are you aware that Dr. Amanda Reynolds is currently providing evidence to international media that your research program involved developing biological weapons rather than defensive countermeasures?" The auditorium fell silent as 30,000 people realized they were witnessing a confrontation between a suspected biological weapons developer and the international scientific community he had deceived. Blackwood attempted to maintain his composure. "I'm not familiar with any allegations being made by former personnel, but I can assure you that all CDC research complies with international biological weapons treaties." Dr. Vasquez held up her smartphone, which displayed live coverage of Amanda's press conference. "Dr. Blackwood, international media are currently broadcasting video evidence of biological weapons testing conducted under your supervision. How do you explain laboratory footage showing weaponized pathogens being tested for lethality rather than defensive countermeasures?" The question created pandemonium in the auditorium as audience members accessed news coverage on their devices and realized they were watching a suspected war criminal attempt to defend research that violated international law. Federal agents entered the auditorium from multiple entrances, moving toward the stage with the methodical precision of professionals executing arrest warrants. Dr. Blackwood, saw them approaching and made a final attempt to control the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, any research conducted under my supervision was authorized by appropriate government officials and conducted in compliance with all applicable laws and treaties. Special Agent Michael Rodriguez reached the stage and approached Blackwood with handcuffs. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, you are under arrest for violations of the Biological Weapons Convention, conspiracy to develop weapons of mass destruction, and violations of congressional oversight requirements for classified research programs. The arrest was broadcast live by journalists who had anticipated the climax of Amanda's revelations. 30,000 scientists, government officials, and international observers watched as the man who had been speaking about biological defense was arrested for developing biological weapons. Dr. Vasquez spoke for the international scientific community. What we're witnessing represents a fundamental betrayal of scientific ethics and international law. The research Dr. Blackwood conducted threatens the global consensus against biological weapons development. In the media room, Amanda watched the arrest coverage with mixed emotions. Justice was being served, but the exposure of American biological weapons research would damage international relationships and scientific cooperation for decades. Agent Torres approached Amanda with news that would reshape her future. Dr. Reynolds, I've just received word from the Attorney General's office. You're being offered full immunity from prosecution in exchange for your continued cooperation with federal investigations. Your testimony will be essential for prosecuting everyone involved in this conspiracy. The offer represented vindication for Amanda's decision to expose the program, but it also meant years of legal proceedings and public scrutiny as prosecutors built cases against the officials who had authorized illegal biological weapons research. Rebecca Matthews summarized the day's events for her international audience. What began as a morning keynote presentation about biological defense has ended with the arrest of a senior CDC official for developing biological weapons. Dr. Amanda Reynolds' decision to expose this program has triggered the largest investigation of biological weapons violations in American history. The immediate crisis was over, but the long-term consequences were just beginning. Amanda had succeeded in exposing the biological weapons program, but the revelation would reshape American foreign policy, scientific research oversight, and public trust in government institutions for generations. The 18 vials of Agent Meridian were secured by federal agents who would transport them to facilities capable of safely destroying biological weapons while preserving samples needed for legal evidence. Amanda's empty stroller stood as a symbol of the courage required to choose truth over personal safety when confronting institutional corruption. 6 months after Dr. Harrison Blackwood's arrest, Amanda Reynolds sat before the Senate Intelligence Committee in a hearing room packed with journalists, government officials, and international observers. The hearings had been broadcast globally, revealing details about biological weapons research that shocked even experienced intelligence professionals. Dr. Reynolds, Senator Patricia Williams addressed the packed chamber. Your testimony has exposed a biological weapons program that operated for over 2 years without congressional knowledge or authorization. Can you help us understand how such a program could exist within our democratic oversight systems? Amanda had spent months preparing for this moment, working with federal prosecutors to build comprehensive cases against 17 government officials who had participated in or covered up the illegal research. Her testimony would reshape how Congress approached oversight of classified scientific research. Senator Williams, the Meridian Project succeeded because it exploited gaps between legitimate defensive research and prohibited offensive weapons development. Dr. Blackwood convinced oversight officials that studying enhanced pathogens was necessary for developing countermeasures, while secretly developing those pathogens as deployable weapons. The hearing room included families of the CDC researchers who had tried to expose the program. Before Amanda's public revelations, Dr. Michael Foster had died in a car accident 3 weeks after questioning Meridian Project protocols. Dr. Lisa Chang had suffered a heart attack at age 36, just days before she planned to file a whistleblower complaint about biological weapons research. Amanda's testimony honored their memory while exposing the systematic elimination of scientists who had attempted to challenge the program through internal channels. The most disturbing aspect of this conspiracy, Amanda continued, was the targeting of researchers who raised ethical concerns about weaponizing biological agents. At least 4 scientists died under suspicious circumstances after questioning the program's legality. Senator Robert Hayes, ranking member of the committee, posed the question that defined the broader implications of Amanda's revelations. Dr. Reynolds, what does this case tell us about the balance between national security research and democratic accountability? Amanda had wrestled with this question throughout the investigation, understanding that her exposures would impact legitimate defense research while preventing the development of prohibited biological weapons. Senator Hayes, I believe this case demonstrates that secrecy without accountability inevitably leads to the violation of laws and treaties that protect humanity from the most dangerous weapons ever conceived. The Meridian Project succeeded because good people were excluded from oversight processes that might have prevented illegal research. The international implications of Amanda's revelations extended far beyond American domestic policy. The United Nations had established a special commission to investigate biological weapons treaty compliance, with Amanda's evidence serving as the foundation for reforms that would govern biological research worldwide. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the microbiologist who had confronted Blackwood during his final presentation, addressed the committee via video link from Geneva. Dr. Reynolds' courage in exposing this program has restored international confidence in scientific integrity and biological weapons treaty enforcement. Her actions prevented the proliferation of weapons that could have destabilized global security. But Amanda understood that her personal victory came at enormous cost to the people whose lives had been destroyed by the conspiracy she'd exposed. The families of dead researchers would never recover their loved ones. The international relationships damaged by American biological weapons research would take decades to rebuild. I want the American people to understand, Amanda testified, that this was never about heroism or patriotism. This was about preventing weapons capable of killing millions of people from being deployed by any government, including our own. The committee's final report, released 3 months later, documented systematic violations of biological weapons treaties and recommended comprehensive reforms to prevent similar programs from operating without oversight. Congress passed legislation requiring independent scientific review of all biological research funded by defense agencies. Dr. Blackwood was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison for violations of the Biological Weapons Convention, conspiracy to develop weapons of mass destruction, and murder charges related to the deaths of researchers who had opposed his program. 16 other officials received sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years for their roles in the conspiracy, but Amanda's victory extended beyond criminal prosecutions. The exposure of the Meridian Project forced a national conversation about the relationship between scientific research and democratic accountability that influenced policy for generations. Amanda returned to civilian life, accepting a teaching position at Johns Hopkins University, where she established the Center for Ethical Biological Research. The center trained scientists to recognize and resist pressures to participate in research that violated international law or scientific ethics. Her first lecture to graduate students addressed the fundamental choice every scientist faces when confronted with institutional pressure to compromise their integrity. Science exists to benefit humanity, Amanda told her students, but scientific knowledge can be weaponized by people who prioritize power over human welfare. Every researcher will face moments when they must choose between career advancement and ethical responsibility. She pointed to a photograph on her office wall showing the empty stroller that had carried Agent Meridian through downtown Seattle. 6 months earlier, the image reminded her students that individual courage could prevent institutional corruption from creating weapons that threaten civilization itself. The stroller in this photograph represents the burden every scientist carries, Amanda explained. We all possess knowledge that could be used to help or harm humanity. The choice we make about how to use that knowledge defines not just our careers, but our character. Amanda's students included researchers from 43 countries, many of whom would return home to establish similar oversight programs that prevented biological weapons research in their own nations. The ripple effects of her decision to expose the Meridian Project continued expanding globally. One student, Maria Santos from Brazil, asked the question that defined Amanda's ongoing mission. Dr. Reynolds, how do we know when institutional loyalty conflicts with moral responsibility? Amanda's answer drew from painful experience with the consequences of both action and inaction. Institutional loyalty becomes dangerous when it requires you to ignore suffering you could prevent. Moral responsibility means accepting personal cost to protect people who cannot protect themselves. The lesson extended beyond biological research to every profession and institution where individuals possessed information about activities that harmed innocent people. Amanda's story became a case study in business schools, law schools, and government training programs worldwide. 2 years after the Meridian Project's exposure, Amanda received a letter from Jennifer Morrison, the bank teller whose life had been saved when Marcus Chun exposed financial corruption in an unrelated case. The letter reminded Amanda that courage was contagious, inspiring other people to choose integrity when facing institutional pressure to remain silent. Dr. Reynolds, Morrison wrote, your example gave me the strength to report financial fraud at my new job. Watching you choose truth over safety taught me that some responsibilities cannot be delegated to other people. Amanda realized that her decision to expose biological weapons research had created a network of people committed to preventing institutional corruption in their own fields. The courage required to push that stroller through downtown Seattle had multiplied across professions and nations. The final validation of Amanda's choice came when the World Health Organization established the Reynolds Protocol, requiring independent ethical review of all biological research with potential weapons applications. The protocol was adopted by 147 nations, creating international standards that prevented the development of biological weapons while protecting legitimate medical research. Amanda's name became associated with the principle that individual integrity could overcome institutional corruption when ordinary people chose extraordinary courage. The baby stroller that had carried evidence of biological weapons through Seattle became a symbol of the responsibility every person carries to protect others from abuse of power. Her story proved that truth-telling remained powerful enough to change systems that seemed impervious to reform. One person with evidence, courage, and determination could expose conspiracies that involved dozens of officials and millions of dollars in secret funding. The question Amanda posed to everyone who heard her story was simple but profound. What will you do when you discover information that could protect innocent people from institutional harm? Her answer was equally simple. You'll discover that choosing integrity over comfort is the only decision that allows you to sleep peacefully, knowing you used your knowledge to protect rather than exploit the people who trusted you to do the right thing. The empty stroller in her office reminded Amanda daily that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act righteously despite personal cost. Every person possesses information that could help or harm others. The choice they make when that moment arrives defines whether they become part of the solution or part of the problem. Amanda Reynolds chose to be part of the solution. The question that remains is, what will you choose when your moment comes? Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.